Hello, I'm Wendy Markert, and I want to welcome you to my final COETAIL project for Course 5. I chose to redesign two units, a geometry unit and a trigonometry unit, and combine them into one project-based learning unit, which I'll refer to as the ARENA project. This project and unit took place over a period of 6 weeks, and I just felt like it was time to get away from the students just learning formulas and applying them to problems, whether they were problems from the textbook, problems that we were finding at school. I wanted them to apply formulas to something more realistic. I wanted them to see how geometry and trigonometry could really come into play into a real project in the real world. And I think we succeeded there. I know that the students realized that there was a whole lot more to designing something real than they thought originally, and they learned a lot more besides math along the way. The challenge that I presented to both of my grade 9 advanced math classes was to create a multi-purpose arena stadium that is located on 20 acres, seats 10,000 spectators, is capable of being converted for at least 2 sports, and it must be able to serve as an entertainment venue when not in use as a sports field. There were 2 rubrics for the students, one for their presentation or Prezi that they were creating, and one for the project overall. While I did want to give my students as much freedom and flexibility as possible to guide their own learning and to choose which topics they needed to learn in depth to incorporate into their project, I was still required to teach to certain standards and benchmarks. And because of that, I still organized this unit as a flipped unit like I've been teaching with checklists as shown here. And then I organized the screencast and the checklist and other resources for my students on our Moodle page. Here is an example screencast that they might use to learn trigonometry. This was a new topic for them. It's a grade 9 introduced topic at my school, so this was a brand new topic that they were learning for their first time, and they did wonderfully on their own. After researching some initial arenas and stadiums online, I had my students do some pre-planning using pencil and paper to get their original designs. Our tech integration specialist helped the students learn how to use SketchUp 8, which is what they used to create their final designs. Moodle forums were helpful for the students to be able to post their designs and to get feedback along the way from the other groups and students in the classes. A typical math class looked very different from usual. Students were setting their own goals, they spread out across the room, had their own space, and were just directing their own learning.
Just go to library and
Student groups had either 3 or 4 students, and each student in the group was assigned the role of team leader for a set period of time. As team leader, the student was supposed to come with an agenda to the class meetings and team meetings, have specific goals for students to accomplish, and help to ensure that students and teammates were accomplishing the goals that they had committed to completing. At the beginning of the project, some of the students were not very happy about having to use some of the technology tools. They wanted to create their arenas by hand and create them out of cardboard. But by the end of the project, I think they were familiar enough or comfortable enough using SketchUp 8 that they saw its benefits. Presentation day was a very exciting day in our classroom. We had our mock city council. The students were all prepared with their presentations. They were confident in their designs, and they wanted to show us all how their design was the best and how it met all of the criteria.
Now, can it seat 10,000 people? Of course it can. Our stadium structure consists of 10 identical bleachers, which were downloaded from the warehouse, and we didn't copy the whole stadium out, we made it on our own. So we placed them around the track and around the field. So there are 10 in total, and each bleacher looks as follows. So each bleacher has 4 components within it, which consists of 21 seats high, each component, and 16 seats horizontally. So when we multiply them, we get a number which is approximately 336 seats. And because there are 4 components, we times that number by 4, with which we get 1,344 seats. So, and remembering that we have 10 bleachers in our whole stadium, we times that whole number by 10. So 1,344 by 10, we get approximately 13,440 people in total. So if the stadium is full because of a concert or a football game or a track and field event, if there's extra people who want to come in, there's definitely enough space.
As the project neared its conclusion, I would often hear students talking about how they felt they were learning the math involved much more deeply than they normally do. Of course, I never did have my iPad out recording these conversations. I did, though, manage to record at least a few comments. So what did you learn about geometry and trigonometry through this project?
So for the geometry, I learned about like how to calculate area with, even though there's like nets in between and everything that's obstructing it. And also for trigonometry, I learned that since we have the seats on the lower level and upper level like this, there's an angle of elevation, so it creates like a triangle, and you can calculate the angle of elevation.
Students kept learning logs throughout the project in Google Docs. Here they recorded their goals, what they accomplished, what their next steps were, and what their most important concerns, problems, or questions were. At the end of the project, students were required to submit final reflections, and it was interesting to read how some of the students came up with creative ways of solving some of their problems. For example, one group had a lot of difficulty meeting outside of class in order to finish up some of their final design issues. So what they did is they created a Facebook group dedicated to the project where they could constantly post statuses to the private group with information, ideas, and plans. This was never mentioned in class, and it was something they came up with on their own. This project has definitely pushed my teaching to a much higher level than I thought achievable before I started COETAIL. Have I reached redefinition though yet? I think currently we're probably at the modification level. We could take some of the technology components out, although it would make the project much harder and much more difficult to accomplish. It would also make some of the problems seem insurmountable. I think as the students finish adding their audio voiceovers to their prezzies, and then they also include tours of their arenas from their Google SketchUp creations, and we post these prezzies to a public site where the outside world can comment on them, I think then we will be approaching redefinition.